question. The first question was this, that like you explained that you're basically looking at different people's profiles and their interests and whatever's on their page, on their profile page, whether it's Orkut or High Five. My question is this: if I build a social network for my business and I use the API, am I in essence importing that information and sort of Xeroxing it, or is it basically sort of bridging the gap instead of importing your MySpace friends onto your Facebook? Is it just sort of letting them stay there yet having them on your interface nonetheless? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? I'll try to explain that again.
Let me paraphrase it back and see if I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
So you're saying, is this a way for importing and exporting friend information from one site to another?
So without effectively making them sign up is my point.
Kind of. The way of looking at it is you're running an application that has access to friend data, and you take that application to where the friend data is. So you take the application to MySpace, and it gets the MySpace friend data. You take it to LinkedIn, it gets the LinkedIn friend data. To actually bridge between them, you have to have shared identities that are matched and that are agreed to by the user. So you can't just arbitrarily connect them because they won't make sense in each other's namespace. Now there are, insofar as the profiles are public, you may be able to connect those together. David Recording sitting in the front row has got a bunch of ideas about how to do that well. You can ask him about those. And there are people inside Google looking at that as well to connect the public profile data. But clearly the private profile data we can't connect without user permission. So we have to work out a way to bridge that. And that's something we're looking at for this, but that's a sort of a later stage model of how to bridge stuff between. The way of thinking about it is, instead of building your own social network for your business, you can take your application to the existing social networks that already exist. But if you think about it that way, it means that instead of having to get everyone to register and sign up for you, you can take the app to where they happen to be and connect to them.
And they sort of stay there, but they're still working with you.
Yes.
So yeah, if I have like 10 people from MySpace, they don't have to sign up for me. They stay at MySpace.
Yes, well, they may have to, depending on what you're doing, they may have to install your application to say, okay, yes, I agree, this application can see my friend data, and that would depend on the site.
Okay.
You can imagine in a corporate environment, you could whitelist a bunch of applications and let them have access to the whole place. The other thing is that this may depend on how you want to implement your application. If you're just using the container application data store, then you're not necessarily sending data back out to your own site, so that can operate almost entirely in isolation. Whereas if you want to send that data to your own site, you'll have to do some more work to map their IDs into your database and so on.
You mentioned the movies extension for MySpace. Is your expectation that you're going to define some optional standards for things like that, or is it going to be anybody can define their own at will?
Bit of both. We're going to try and converge as much as we can. We started out deliberately with the simplest thing possibly work, with the most limited person record that we could come up with. We want to try and extend that a bit more to add more information to that. There are some aspects of that that are tricky. One of them is if we start putting contact information in, there's a permissioning problem of giving email addresses out to applications without other people's email addresses, not just your own. There's that issue. There's also an issue of, is there a common representation for favourite movies that we can share? Favourite movies there probably is. Some of the other fields that the social network sites have are more site-specific, and therefore they'll be able to add them in. But both the models, both the JavaScript model and the XML model are naturally extensible in slightly different ways. And we're working to make that converge as much as we can for that information records, and then leave space for extensibility.